In this session, we will see how Okta Workflows is being leveraged at Bain and Company for customer identity. I'm Ajay Seetharam, Senior Solution Architect here at Okta, and I'm joined by Kristen from Bain and Company. Okta Workflows is a key platform service and part of the bigger platform story at Okta, helping you automate identity for employees and customers. Last year at Octane, we launched Okta Workflows Lifecycle Management, which helps you automate identity centric processes for employees. Consider an example. You have a new hire, and this new hire is given access to Salesforce and also assigned a new sales territory and receives an email welcome message. And a notification is sent to the appropriate Slack channel introducing the new hire. This year, we are launching Okta Workflows for customer identity. And you can take similar actions and do much more. Let us take an example. A user registers, and this user is propagated to OneTrust as a data subject. During registration, the user indicates their consent and marketing preferences, which are propagated to OneTrust Preference Center. And the identity is added to an email distribution list for marketing automation purposes. This is just an example. It is not prescriptive. Okta Workflows provides connectors and templates to OneTrust and also Marketo, Onfido, Evident ID, Mixpanel, and so on. And the amazing thing about this product is that you can connect with any public cloud accessible API. So the possibilities are endless. You can use Okta Workflows to connect with your marketing automation, analytics, consent and privacy, identity verification, and so on. Okta Workflows helps identity administrators, architects, and developers to connect with applications, APIs, and technology stacks. It is important to note that you can easily integrate and do it faster, regardless of whether you're a career developer or someone with little coding experience. You can think of Okta Workflows as a no-code automation platform that spans your entire customer identity technology stack. Here are the use cases that we are focusing on initially: user registration and creation of identities, syncing and provisioning to backend services and systems, and streamlining operations. Consider an example in the B2B scenario. You have a user register, and that identity has to be sent for a compliance check. Or the analogy in a B2C scenario, where the identity that gets created has to be passed on to an identity verification service like Onfido as an applicant for further verification checks. That identity could be propagated and synced to a backend CRM system or a marketing automation platform. And then, as a part of normal operations, if a user were to report a suspicious activity, that could trigger a notification to a security administrator. These are examples of what you can do with Okta Workflows. With that introduction to Okta Workflows, it is my pleasure to introduce to you Kristen, who has been pivotal in automating identity-centric processes for customers at Bain and Company.
Hi everyone, my name is Kristen, and I'm a manager on the Solutions Architecture team at Bain. My current focus is on identity and helping support our external facing websites such as Bain.com and our macro surveillance platform. I've been working with AJ over the past several months on getting workflows up and running at Bain, and I'm really excited to show you some of the things that we've been working on. Bain is one of the world's top management consulting firms, and we work with clients and companies from all over the world. The relationship we have with the people we work with is very important, so we always strive to implement the best experiences across our digital platforms. This means we have a lot of interesting use cases as we work with our identity platforms, and Okta has allowed us to improve the experience of people accessing various websites at Bain. Here's a map of all of our offices worldwide. As we think about the best experiences for our clients, we also need to make sure that our 12,000 employees also have the same access to various applications. Bain works alongside companies across every industry and capability. Vector, Bain's digital delivery platform, is integrated across all of them. Because of this, we need to make sure our identity platform matches their high expectations, and we are constantly looking at ways to improve the login experience and streamline administrative tasks without sacrificing security. We don't want authentication to be a blocker for our teams working together in Bain's digital landscape. Not only is Bain a great company to partner with, we're also a great company to work for. We're currently ranked number one on Glassdoor's Best Places to Work in 2021, where we have a record number of times in the number one slot since the list's inception. We're also consistently ranked as the best place to work for diversity, parents, sustainability, and many more. We implemented Okta in 2018 as part of our Bain.com redesign. After the initial rollout, the use of Okta at Bain has grown, and many different business stakeholders at Bain wanted customized access to their platforms. All of our current users are known contacts at Bain and have an important relationship with us. This is a little different than a site such as Netflix or Facebook, where anyone can just create an account and start using the site. We wanted an easy way to allow clients, potential clients, recruits, and many others to access their own personal or confidential information. Our small identity team does not have the resources to onboard developers to create custom applications and APIs for each of these needs. When we first heard about customer workflows, we jumped at the opportunity to implement our own Okta customizations. Two of the platforms I help support that use Okta for authentication are Bain.com and the macro surveillance platform. On the Bain.com platform, we grant clients and prospects access to private or private materials. For recruits, we grant access to supplementary materials for events. Former employees also get access to our CMS system as well as their own personal features on Bain.com. The Bain macro surveillance platform is another independent site that is a subscription service that provides analytics on overall global macro trends. This service had a massive influx early last year as they were trying to gain access to Bain's macro trends team information on how COVID would affect businesses. As we learn more about workflows, there's a growing list of ideas that we can use to help them improve and how we use Okta. Our stakeholders have lean teams with varying needs and customized processes. For example, the process for onboarding users for the recruiting team that need access to materials for an event is much different than a partner following up with a client with proprietary or confidential data. We're planning to use workflows to help automate many admin tasks, and as well as reducing friction for users on login. Some of our Okta admins are also looking for custom metrics on user activity, which we can now capture in workflows. We are also planning on using it to put business logic around the flow of data within Okta and the different integrations we have with things like our CRM and our BI tools. These are just the start of the powerful things that we can do with workflows. Today, I'll show you 3 examples that are pretty simple, but will show you how you can use them to write your own customizations without needing developers or custom API calls. For our first demo, we're going to show how easy it is to remove pending users. At Bain, we realized that we had a bunch of accounts sitting in the pending status as a leftover from our migration from our old authentication system. The only way to delete them would be to go by hand into each one. Workflows allowed us to quickly query the users and delete them automatically. This is actually going to be very similar to a process we put into production this year using Workflows. Here is a high-level algorithm for the live demo. It will show you how easy it is to query users based on the certain criteria and then iterate over those users to perform additional tasks. So first we'll query users for pending status. Then we'll use a secondary flow or child flow to process each user. This is actually very similar to calling like a function if we were to write code for this. Then in that child flow, we can deactivate and then delete each individual user. Now let's swap over to Okta so you can see this in action. Okay, to start this demo, we're going to first show that we have some pending users that we need to be deleted. So you can see here we have 5 pending users that need to be deleted. So to get started in the Workflows menu, in the Workflows console, so I'm going to go ahead and open that. I like to keep things organized by folder. So over here you can see we can have the ability to add a new folder. So I'm going to come over here and say delete pending users. Okay, so I'm going to go into this folder. Now we have the ability to start creating a new flow in this empty folder. So the first thing we're going to do is create a new flow. The first thing you want to do is add a way to trigger the event, or how is it going to flow. In this case, we're going to go ahead and use what's called a child flow, which will allow us to run it on demand. But you can also do things by triggering it from, as you can see, a bunch of different applications. You can schedule the workflow, you can create an API endpoint, or you can even do things like trigger things on activities that happen within Okta itself. For example, when a user is created. So I'm going to go ahead for now and go ahead and create that child flow. And the first thing we're going to do is the first step is going to actually go ahead and query Okta for those users. So we're going to go ahead and pick Okta. And then you can actually see here all the different things that you can do. And we're going to go ahead and list users with a filter. And we want all of the matching records. So click Save. And then these are the different things you can filter on. In this case, we just want status. So I'm just going to remove all of these and leaving the outputs as a default for now. Clicking Save. So now we actually have to pick the status that we want. And for now, all pending users have a provisioned status. So go ahead and select that. I'm going to go ahead and save this whole thing. So give it some detail. We want to go ahead and save all the data that passes through. This will allow us to easily see and debug the system. Click Save. Now we can actually go ahead and test this individual card. So there's a play button down here. And what this will do is you actually can see it'll say provisioned. And once I test, we're going to go ahead and see all of those 5 users. So you can see there's 5 options, and you can click into this to get more information. But for now, we are going to close this. And now I'd like to go ahead and actually click the child flow before we go ahead and process this list. So I'm actually going to go back to the main folder and create a new flow. Once again, this is going to be a child flow. But this time we're going to have to take in some information. So we're going to go ahead and add in the user ID as an input into this flow. Now, once we have the user ID, we have to first deactivate an account. So now we're going to go back into Okta and we're going to say deactivate the user. And we are not going to send the users an email in this case. And now we can go ahead and drag this user ID over into this box. And it'll show a nice line so you can quickly see where this is being used. And now we have a deactivated user ID. The next step is going to be to delete the user. So go ahead and create a card for deleting the user. Once again, we have to go ahead and use that user ID. We are also not going to send an email, and you see the output. So go ahead and save this. I'm going to call this a child flow delete in the user. Again, saving the data through so we can see what happens when this runs. Okay, now we need to go through and loop through all of those accounts. So we're going to go back to the first flow that we created. Oh, actually, we need to turn this on first. So we go ahead and turn this on so it's active. Now we're going to go back in here and delete all of those users. So in here, there's something called a function, which we can now have a whole host of other things that we can do with the data. So in this case, we're going to go through and list, and we're going to loop through each item. I like picking the one where it ignores errors, just in case one of our users errors out, it won't stop the whole flow for everybody. So we're going to go ahead and we can now take this list result that came back and drag this into the list for the for each card. And now we're going to actually choose a flow. We'll go ahead and choose the child flow that we created for each user. And now we are given the option of, in this drop-down list, all of the data that comes back. So we're going to go ahead and pick the ID, which will then input that into the user ID field of the child flow. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and save that. And that is pretty much it. So now we can go ahead and run this and test it, and you will see that everything is been deleted if this works. So now you can see all of the data that's coming through the system. The JSON that comes back for each user is being passed in. You can also go into each flow and see the history. So in this case, you can come in and see that it's already deleted for users. So it'll give each one. Okay, we should go back to the parent flow and the history, and you can see it was successful. Now if I come back in here and look and refresh the screen, you can now see that all of the pending users are now out of the system. And there you have it. It was how quickly it was to create a very simple workflow to delete pending users out of your system. For the second scenario, I'm going to demonstrate how you can actually use a spreadsheet of a list of users to automatically create the accounts and add them to the right group. This is especially helpful when the users don't already exist in Okta. At Bain, most times we know who needs access to our systems and we'll invite them to join. This means they need immediate access into a group on first login. So instead of each admin having to create the account and then add them to the right group, Workflows will do that for them automatically. And again, here's a kind of a high-level algorithm of the workflow that I'll show you. Basically, we can show how you can upload a spreadsheet from a business administrator. Then we can query that table and iterate over each user. And then again, we'll use a child flow to process each user. In this case, we'll also check to see if the user already exists. If not, it'll create the staged account and then add them to the right group. Once done, we can also use the workflow to send an email notification to the administrator, letting them know that the users are all set up, and then they can invite them to the platform. Okay, now we're back in the Okta Workflows area. So I'm going to go ahead and click on a folder I already created called Group Access. And in here, you'll see we have two workflows. I created the parent flow and the child flow already. I also created a custom table. This will be used to import all of the users from a spreadsheet I went ahead and created some columns called first name, last name, email, group ID, a message to hold any information about the workflow that we can write to, and then a user ID. So I'm going to go back to the main flow. So in this case, the main flow we're going to have is we're going to go ahead and I created a child flow so it can be run on demand. And then it's the first thing we're going to do is actually query that table that you just saw, and to get all of the users that have a user ID equal to star. And then we can go ahead and get those results and then call the child flow to process that each user. So what I'll do is I'll go show you the child flow. Okay, so then now we have a child flow that accepts a bunch of parameters that match those column names. So username, group ID, first name, last name, and then the row ID, so we know which row to update with any write messages. So in order to check to see if a user already exists, I'm going ahead and using a list users with filter, and the value I'm providing is the username. So that'll query any users with that username. And then the result will come back. And then now I can use a length card to actually check to see, it'll return a numeric value of the length. In this case, if there are no users with that, it'll return with a length of 0. Now we know we have to go ahead and create the user. This particular create user has an option to create users with a group ID, so I went ahead and did that. And then I went ahead and dragged on all the values for that user from the child flow definition. So username, first name, last name. And then once we have that user created, I'm going to go ahead and update that row that we had with the user ID that's returned in the value that comes back. If the user already exists, we're going to go ahead and use an Okta card to read that user to get by username, and then that'll return the user ID. Then we can go ahead and instead of creating the user, we're just going to add it to the group with the group ID, that user ID, and then the same thing. We're going to update that row in the table with the row ID with a message saying that it was already an existing user. Okay, so to run this, we need to add data into that table. So go back to the home, clicking on the table, create users and group. So now I have a spreadsheet that I'm going to go ahead and call and use to import. So import users, drag that over. It'll give you the opportunity to map the columns from the CSV over to the column. It's actually pretty good. I went ahead and used the same name, so it understood which row, which column it needed to go to which column. I'm going to go ahead and import. Okay, so we have 5 users here. The first one is actually a user that is already in the system to show you how we can actually update the group and the message here, and then the rest are going to be new users. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to the workflow, the main one. Now, if we want to go ahead and add a card to alert the original requester to send an email once this is completed, we can go ahead and do that. So I'm going to go ahead and add an app function. I've previously created a connection up to my Office 365, so I'm going to go ahead and use that to send the email. So you can see we now have an option to send an email with some values that you would expect to see on an email. So I'm going to go ahead and put in a Mailinator email address for the two. Just a demo account. The subject is going to be workflow has completed. Okay. I'm going to going to go ahead and send it just as a plain text and save it. And now we can test it. So you can see here it returned all of those rows that were in that table as JSON. Once again, we can also go into the child flow to see each individual call with the history. And you can see that it was successful. In this case, it went ahead and created the new user. And around the first one, you can just go through and just see the different users. Okay. And now this one is completed. So now I can actually come over here and see that we now have an email that the workflow has completed. Okay, now that you see we have an email, we can go back in and look at that table. And now you can see here the one user that already existed has a message saying existing user was added to the group, and then the others have the ID of the user that was created. And there you go. We have a workflow that you can take in a spreadsheet of users, upload it into Okta Workflows, and then go ahead and process them to create users and add them to the right group. The idea for our last demo came from research one of our teams did by analyzing 3 months of user activity from email campaigns and Okta logs. We found that 38% of the users were lost when logging into the system. They either clicked on the link and then never logged in, or their last session ended in a failed login. We're now actively looking at ways we can reduce the number of steps a user needs to go through to access Bain systems without sacrificing security. One idea is to set up an application with custom policies to just use MFA factors and no longer require a password. With workflows, we can take this a step further for our users by automatically setting up these factors for them. In this demo, I will show you how you can automatically create a user, enroll them in the MFA factors, and then when they access the system for the first time, they will just need a one-time password. Again, here's an overview of the third demo. In this example, I'll also show a few new types of cards. One of the cards is available is the HTTP raw request. This is actually a very powerful card, as Ajay mentioned earlier, where you can call any HTTP endpoint. In the demo, we'll use it to call a mock CRM to get additional information about the user we're trying to create. Also, not all Okta functionality has a card in workflows, but they do have a custom API card, which will allow you to call any API that Okta provides. This is what I will use to enroll the users into the different MFA policies. And then at the end, I'll show how the user can just log in with an email and then get a one-time password to their email. Okay, for this demo, we are back in our workflows area of Okta. So I'm going to go ahead and click into, I have a folder called Login with One-Time Password, and we're going to have a passwordless entry workflow. So clicking in to see the details. Again, we have a child flow, which will allow us to run it on demand. It's going to take 2 inputs. It's going to take the login and a phone number. We are going to get some more information about this user out of a mock CRM system that we have. So in order to do that, we're going to send an HTTP request out. So we're going to build out our URL and put in the login as a variable. Then we're going to use an HTTP raw request card that'll allow us to go out and call any HTTP endpoint. And so in this case, we're going to pass over our GET request, and then we're going to get our body back, which is going to be in a JSON format. And Workflows provides a JSON parse card, which will then you can see here we're passing in the body tag, the body variable, and we'll go ahead and parse that out into the variables that are provided, which is going to be first name, last name, company, and job title. Okta still requires a password, even though they won't need it to log in. So we're going to go ahead and generate a random one for them. Using a random number generator and then also appending an execution ID. This will make it, super unique and hard to guess. We're going to go ahead and use that create user card by passing in the login information, also that additional information we got out of the CRM, and then passing in the password. So you'll have the first name, last name, job title, company. We're going to go ahead and add a user to a group. We've pre-populated with the group ID that we know will have the right policy set. We can go ahead and activate that user. And then now we can enroll them in the MFA factors. So we're going to go ahead and build out those URLs again using the compose cards. We're going to build the URL, and then we're also going to pass in the build out the JSON that we need for the body. So one is going to be for the SMS factor and another for the email factor. And then we're going to go ahead and call the Okta custom API actions. Again, this will help use your existing Okta connections to go ahead and call those any API that you need out of Okta. So we're going to go ahead and enroll them in the factors for both the phone number and email. And that is all set. And to go ahead and show you, I've actually created a Mailinator account. So I'll go ahead and test this. And you can see here, I've run this before, so you can actually save it for testing. So you're going to have the email, an address at mailinator.com, and then a phone number. So let's go ahead and run. And while this is running, I'll show you how you can kind of see some of the information coming back. So you can see the body came back with the JSON here, and now it's being passed in over here. It's being parsed into variables that are readable. So then now when you create the user, we're creating an account for Scott Adams, adding to the group and composing all of those text variables. And now you can actually see it's got the well-formed JSON that we can then use to call our Okta APIs. So now let's go ahead and try to see what happens when you log in. So we're going to go in here, enter my Mailinator email address. Now as you can see, first time the user comes in, they are immediately prompted with a verification code to email. So you can switch it to SMS, but for the sake of today's demo, I'm going to use email. So I'm going to actually send the code. I'm going to go back over here to Mailinator. We have our one-time code. I can copy this in. And now the user is into it. And we have just kind of a application here that's you can have for a link. And that is it. So you can now use workflows to enroll someone in factors, activate their account, and then the first time they log in, they just need to have a one-time password. So at Bain, we're already starting to see a lot of value out of using workflows. Users can now have a streamlined process to get access to the system, which increases their overall engagement with this platform. Also, that we can reduce the number of users that need help by having to reset passwords or get confused by the registration process. For our admins, we see the benefit of no longer needing to do manual process to process all of these different user scenarios. And then we also reduce the need of a developer to write these customizations. And then as you saw in the demos, they're also very easy to create in a very short amount of time. Here are some other tips and things that we've learned as we work with workflows. One suggestion would be to always build these in the preview tenant. You can then export out them in their entirety and then move them over to a production tenant. And this allows you to make sure they're working in a lower environment before moving them to production. The other thing which we didn't really show is you need to have robust error handling. Okta provides both error handling cards as well as error settings in each card individually. I would also recommend validating the data and user statuses during each step to make sure that the data is exactly how you expect it. And lastly, you don't have to start from scratch. Okta provides a ton of templates you can use to customize and then as well as learn to see what functionality is available with varying different workflows. I hope I've provided some valuable information and sparked your imagination about what you can do with workflows in your organization. If you want more information about Bain, I have provided some links for Bain's digital delivery and our macro surveillance platform. Also, if you want more information about workflows, there's a link here. And then also they have free programming training, which will also go into much more details about how you can use workflows.
Christine, thank you very much. That
Yeah.
was very, very informative. I'm curious, when you go back in time to the time you just started working with workflows, how did you approach ramping up? And I was very impressed by the speed with which you built out a whole bunch of flows before our second meeting.
Yeah, it's very intuitive to use. I really enjoyed it. I went in again. Flowgramming course was very helpful. Using Okta templates and seeing what's available. Also, going in and experimenting was also very helpful.
Excellent. And you've done an amazing job automating customer identity at Bain. Can you share sort of how you got into technology, what inspired you in the first place, and some of your future plans with workflows at Bain?
Yeah, I've pretty much been involved in technology my whole life. I remember when I was very young, around 7 or 8 years old, my dad he was a programmer, and he would actually take me his office in New York City with the old big mainframes and the reel to reels. That would take up a full room and show me how he would actually, program these massive systems. He would also show me, teaching us code as well as reading and writing and math. I remember learning binary at the same time I was learning my, 1+1. And it's interesting because now my daughter's actually at the same age. She's 8 years old now, and she's just gotten into with her class. They have something called Hour of Code, which actually kind of gamifies programming by allowing kids to drag and drop various elements, if statements and for loops and variables and functions. And she was able to use a very simple interface to kind of create games. When I first started working with workflows, I actually thought there was a pretty good similarities between this and that. Is now instead of building a child's game, you can actually use some of that drag and drop functionality with for loops and various cards and actually build real world applications. So it's actually pretty inspiring. I actually even showed her workflows and goes, "Look, I'm doing the same thing you are for my job." It was actually pretty fun. And at Bain, we're constantly looking at new ways. Just this week, in the last couple of weeks, we've gotten new ideas where they want to automate things, creating SAML applications. Well, now instead of having the help desk going in once or twice a week and going in, creating the application and stuff like that, I did a quick POC and was using the Okta APIs, and I kind of automated that whole process. And we're just looking at that as an experiment to see, what's possible. So we're actually really excited, and we're constantly looking at new things to do with workflows.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Christine, for sharing your experiences at Bain. And I find it really nice that you're able to code very similar to your daughter and with the no code automation platform, but
Yeah,
automating important identity centric
yeah,
processes.
absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks. It's been great being here today.